I don't know how many of you here know who Michael Ian Black is. You might be too young. Amin is noticing this week that he's old when he made a Jewel reference and realized that on the playground, he realized this week that the language of the playground is no longer acceptable. He realized it on air while staring at the microphone. Weird thing to realize as an adult, but he also has realized as an adult that he's washed.
Welcome to the club, my friend.
Man, I really needed the support, Stugotz.
Yeah,
when
you
I
got
started
it.
singing. Who will save your soul?
Oh, that's a good one.
Are you the only one here who knows who Michael Ian Black is from those 90s? I mean, this is where I know him from, the 90s pop culture. I just loved how funny he was when he would be on that television show being nostalgic and snarky about things in our recent past.
Yeah, he was that guy like on Comedy Central on all those 90s, relive the 90s things.
I love
and you
the
just
90s.
Yeah.
I love
Of the 90s, yeah.
He's going to be on with us later this hour, and I probably should tell people that we talked to him, and it was great. There's a surprise guest making an appearance that I did not think was going to happen. A huge surprise, a fun surprise, a great surprise, but we taped it right before what just happened yesterday in Texas, but it's prescient because he's written a book where he writes about masculinity and how it is that it's affected him. And I just really thought that the conversation was super interesting. He was bored when we were talking about the pop culture candy stuff, but he was engaged and smart and has dedicated himself to writing a book about some of the things that can be entangled in what it is that we witnessed yesterday. So that'll be at the end of this hour. But I wanted to ask Amin and Tom before we get to some other stuff, because I don't know how Billy feels. Billy, did you read it all about
Oh, yeah.
Johnny Cueto?
No.
Who's reading about Johnny Cueto?
Yeah, did something new happen with Cueto? Or are we just
Yeah.
going through like was there like a TBT thing that popped up that was posted on Facebook like 10 years ago today about Johnny Cueto?
Johnny Cueto's in the league.
Really?
He is?
What league?
Get out of here.
Major League Baseball?
You're lying.
No, he's not.
No.
Johnny Cueto is in the Chicago White Sox organization, and he has, just like Robinson Cano does, and a few other guys in the Dominican, a tricked-out ambulance. And the back of the ambulance, not unlike a transformer, okay? The doors go out wide when you open the back of the ambulance, and all it is like speakers. It's just music. These guys have these tricked-out ambulances that they're driving around in the Dominican Republic, and they are magical, loud things that also, if you have an emergency, can get you to a place of healing very quickly.
Wait, what you just described was a nesting doll of surprise. Like he goes, I want to talk to Tom and Amin. And I'm expecting like, all right, so what did Luka Doncic do last night?
Well, no,
You know,
I did
Steve
want.
Kerr.
I wanted to get to you guys on
And he-
Oklahoma City
How does
having
he carry it forward?
17 draft picks in 5 years. In the next 5 years is where I wanted to go, but I saw Billy's shining face, and I had the Cueto news, and I had to deliver
Well,
it.
just so we're clear, do you want Tom and Amin's opinions on Johnny Cueto and the
Well,
ambulance,
I didn't
or no?
mean to get
Right.
derailed by the ambulance, but once you're at
Why
the
is
ambulance,
Johnny Cueto good this year?
I don't know that good is how I would describe him, because he hasn't pitched all that much.
He has 2 games started. He has a 1 whip, and he has a, let's see here. Hold on a second. A 0 ERA.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to beat a 0 ERA, Dave.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Even in today's baseball.
Yeah.
You made a sound. I mean, usually another sound comes after
I'm
that.
letting the laughter live, man. Can we have joy in our lives,
Letting
man?
it breathe.
Look, man, the headline is Johnny Cueto's 54-speaker ambulance will blow your mind.
That's Jeff Passan, I believe, was the author on that story. And I just wanted to ask all of you if you knew there was such a thing as a tricked out ambulance.
Oh my.
I did not know that this was a style.
This is a transformer of speakers.
That's what I was trying to explain to you. You said Russian nesting doll, but I was trying to explain that, like, when the doors go out and are swapped open, what you have is a giant speaker system that is wider than the ambulance.
What I was saying about the surprise of a nesting doll of surprise is every sentence you added to that Johnny Cueto story got weirder and weirder, where I did not know where it was going. He has an ambulance. Okay, ambulance. Wow, why does he need an ambulance? Oh, it's filled with speakers.
Right.
Oh, okay. This is the weirdest thing. So, like, I'm
Oh my God.
Yeah, I just saw it. Stugotz.
I think he bought it from Octavio Dotel.
Of course he did.
Wow.
So this is kind of
What a
like making the
flamethrower.
round.
Is he
Yeah.
still in the league?
I think he
No.
also has a 0 ERA this year.
No.
Really?
Dotel cannot be in the league. He's got a
never
0.
know, Dan.
Do you have a 0 ERA if you have not thrown a pitch in the league?
Hold on. This thing gets deeper.
What?
First of all, the speakers are so loud, the bass is so loud that when Cueto parked his ambulance next to a pool, the water began splashing up. But listen to the motivation. His souped-up ambulance is even louder than Robinson Cano's. Yes, you read that correctly. Robinson Cano also owns an ambulance with speakers.
Steve Martin was a prop comic.
It's too much.
Okay.
I had a friend in like high school and college. His name was Ander. He's still my friend.
Right.
But he had like the I think it's like the Honda Element, right? Is that the one that was like a
boxy
like
one?
Yeah, like a box.
Yeah.
Right? And he set up like this ridiculous bass system in the car, right? And it was nowhere near this. Like, it looked nothing like this. It was just kind of like a simple thing that you get from Senor Stereo or wherever it is that he got it from. And the thing had the whole car shaking. And he just turned up the bass, and it was, like, ridiculous. We'd be playing Manny Fresh and Trina, and the car was just... And the whole car is shaking in Anders' Honda Element. And it was absurd. And eventually he got rid of it because he's like, this is too ridiculous. But that wasn't an ambulance that opened up and had 6,000 speakers on it.
Dotel hasn't pitched in the majors since 2013.
I love that detail, incidentally. As a comedic name,
Thank you.
he bought it from Octavio Dotel.
Do you think he had all the speakers on it, or he just had like an ambulance? And then this was kind of like souped up.
This feels like it's a thing. Like the ambulances with the speakers is a thing. Now, I think the ambulance already had speakers, and he just took it to another level, added more speakers to an ambulance that already had speakers.
Do you think the essential parts of the ambulance still work, though? Like the sirens and all that stuff? Like if in case of an emergency, can he just turn it on and go to the hospital?
Did
Like, what
it
happens
work? Have you ever heard a siren through 54 speakers?
It clears even more traffic because when he goes full transformer on it.
The bass alone clears the traffic. So people aren't moving. Their cars are literally just shaking out of the way.
What's your guys' strategy like when you see, and this is like a horrible thing, what's your guys' strategy when you see an ambulance driving and everybody's clearing the way for the ambulance? Like, are any of you that person that says, you know what? It's time to drift right behind this person. It's time to like go right
Where's Chris
behind
Cody
the
going?
ambulance.
Chris
and
Cody
I've
cut
been
the
known
line.
to drift. I got to be honest.
Chris, put it on the poll,
It's
Guillermo.
drafting, yeah, I messed
At
that one up.
LeBatard Show,
Fine.
have you ever drafted behind an ambulance when it's in a hurry to get in to an emergency? Chris, you seem to have shown some shame. Is this a signature move of yours?
Not a signature move, but I'm not gonna say if traffic's really bad. Oh my God, it's just like I just happen to be continuing my route. I just happen to be behind the ambulance. Like, hey, the ambulance passed. Time to get back to driving. I happen to be right behind it now.
Exactly. Like, why is that a problem? Like, we're supposed to get out of the way of the ambulance. We did. The ambulance is gone. If Chris goes right behind it, he's the first.
Should every car stop?
Yeah,
And
forever?
just stop for 20
Forever.
minutes?
No,
I
forever.
gotta
No, but I mean, the problem is when multiple cars are racing to be the first behind the ambulance.
That happened. And then
And
one
I've done
needs
it.
one. Yeah.
I mean-
yeah. Have you ever accidentally ended up at the hospital doing that?
No.
Because you're like, let me see how far I can go.
I took it off my exit.
I love the idea of ending up at the hospital because you're like Stugotz, enraged and fighting another car. You get into an accident. Now they got to send an ambulance. Like you end up there because you're in such a hurry to elbow the next guy out of the way.
Yeah, that ambulance is definitely my fallback. They actually did that in a scene in Die Hard with a Vengeance. They actually did that exact scene, trying to get across town in New York.
Do we know any ambulance drivers? Do they just use that liberally sometimes? The siren, just like
Every
They have to.
everybody who has a vehicle that has a siren on it does that. They
If you
have
were
to.
in traffic and you had a siren, would you not sound it off and just go?
yeah.
All the time, right?
Question: if I'm like injured and Johnny Cueto's ambulance shows up, do I want to get in that, or do I say just send the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great question.
It depends on two things. One, how injured are you? And two, what kind of music is he playing?
Like, He's Bad Bunny. He's like, all right, let's do this.
But water trembling, pulling up next to something and making the water in a pool tremble. I've never had an experience in my life where I need music that loud. And I'm the one who has told you I retired from the nightclub scene when I went to live, and it hurt my nipples. The way the music was playing was making my nipples vibrate. I'm not, it's like my chest.
They were sore
my
the next
chest
day?
hurt, and I sort of realized while I'm there, I'm like, you know what? This is not the place for me. Like this. And if the music is so loud that my nipples are vibrating, I need to leave now and never return.
So washed people usually go to a club and it's too loud and they put their hands over their ears. Dan, you're putting your hands
over my nipples.
Over your nipples.
That's
You're
right.
holding them thusly.
Like a woman emerging from the shower who was not expecting to be seen. Yes.
The clench.
That's right. My bosom was vibrating from the music, and I fled.
You got a purple nipple literally from sound.
That's right. I did. I'm not even making that up. I remember the way it shook. But on our detoured route that ended up in an ambulance.
But you remember in that moment, this is it for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Officially washed. My nipples told me.
Were you sad?
The nipples were the first to know. Not sad. No, I was just trying to get out from under the infernal noise.
I have in your brain the people who show up with the folded up flag and to tell the sad news to the brain that you're washed, it's over, are the two nipples. They showed up in the uniform and said, I'm sorry to report, sir.
They were
Lieutenant Dan?
they were shaking, and they informed me it's over now. You need to leave here. This is not a place you belong. But the place I actually started in trying to get over to where it is that Tom and Amin can offer some expertise is, unlike the ambulance.
I thought they were great on it. I got to be honest.
That the Oklahoma City Thunder have 17 draft picks in the next 5 years. And as LeBron said, Sam Presti, you're the real MVP. What does that mean? So, I mean, the Celtics and Ainge had all those draft picks for a long time, and I'm not sure. Maybe you can help me. The development of their players and their team has been stronger over the last few years.
I mean, they're 2 games away from the finals.
I know, but everybody's wanted them to trade these pieces forever. Like, they're 2 games away from the finals, but they haven't been to the finals in a long time, at least in part, because they've been, like, this close for a bit. They've been around here.
Right. No, that's totally
and
fair.
Everybody's been waiting for, well, is it going to be Gordon Hayward, or who they gonna go get with the picks? And they're still
Al Horford.
Al Horford is the guy they're going to get with the picks after Philadelphia chooses him over Jimmy Butler. But what does it mean, 17 picks in 5 years?
Means flexibility. Means if they want to go get a superstar, and a team like the Portland Trailblazers are like, you know what, we need to reboot. Yes, we will take 18 of your first-round picks for Damian Lillard, and they can reboot on the fly. If they don't want to do that, they can reboot for 10 years. They can do this rebuilding
But what
thing.
are they
It's
worth?
options.
What I'm asking you is, what is that worth? All of it. I throw out there 17 picks. My point in asking is, Boston had a bunch of picks for a bunch of years, and they were not happy with Ainge because he didn't parlay those picks into whatever it is that Boston wanted Ainge to parlay those picks into. And I'm asking you for the real worth of those things because they're the only team in the sport who's decided to go it that way.
It's currency. It's like saying, well, what is all that money going to do for you? Like, well, I can buy stuff. Like, what are you going to buy? I don't know yet. I haven't figured it out. But when the time comes, if you see Drew Holiday going for 3 picks and 2 pick swaps, if you see Anthony Davis going to 3 picks and 2 pick swaps, all these major player movements are costing an arm and a leg in picks, where you got a team like the Lakers who are leveraged forever pretty much because of the Anthony Davis deal, even though obviously they won a championship out of it. Oklahoma City has the opportunity, the flexibility to, when one of these whales comes on the market, they can go out and get him and not kind of bankrupt themselves from the ability to build a supporting cast around them.
You're just looking for bites at the apple. And when you're going for Danny Ainge and saying, well, what are you going to do with those draft picks? Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Robert Williams III are all 25 and younger.
Pretty good.
They're going to get a lot of bites at the apple at winning a championship because they were investing in their youth and getting those picks and making sure that they could invest in their player development, because this is not just going to be the first time that this core is going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're going to have a lot of opportunities to do this because they're so young. You look at a team like the Utah Jazz, they put all their chips in the middle for Mike Conley, 35-year-old Mike Conley, and Bogdanovich. They're mid-30s. They're done. But if you stay young and you get these bites at the apple trying to get Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Robert Williams III, you can have not a dynasty, but more opportunities to win that elusive title.
And again, that assumes they keep them. Like when you have 17 over the next 5 years, Dan, it's almost to a point where it's like Brewster's Millions. You got to spend this money. You can't just hold on to it.
They have 10 first-round picks over the next 3 years.
They cannot use every one of those picks. It's literally impossible unless they're all draft and stash guys, and there aren't that many guys who are that good to draft and stash. So at some point, they are going to have to consume, and as opposed to keep getting them. And when they do, they'll be able to really build a team that's going to be deep and kind of flexible and multi-positioned and all that stuff, right? In the sense that you start with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and by the end of it, he might be the best player on a very, very, very deep team, or he might be like your third or fourth best player because of the deals that you've been able to do.
The Miami Heat have one top 10 pick on the roster. It's Victor Oladipo. I generally don't assign much value, even though you can get lucky, to anything after 15. I may have this wrong historically. My information is dated. This is about 10 years ago. The 15 picks weren't worth very much. You can get lucky, but it didn't have the value of Adebayo. You're going to find Adebayo after the top. You really didn't. I mean, it was 7 or 8 picks were the top picks that you wanted. But the Clippers trade now. Mm-hmm. After you look at what Oklahoma City got in exchange for Paul George and the way the Clippers did what I believe any of us would have done, which is you got to figure out a way to get Kawhi Leonard so that you can compete with the Lakers in that market and get close. In retrospect now, without even knowing what the picks are, because we don't know what the picks are, and I'm trying to press you guys on the value of those picks, because you say bites at the apple and options and everything else, but the value. That trade now, what of it? Years later, what's the analysis?
Well, Jimmy Butler didn't sign here. There was a sign and trade. The Miami Heat got Josh Richardson with a second-round pick and parlayed. They built him up, and that was the jewel of that trade for Philadelphia. That's what the Miami Heat do, is they say, screw the draft. We're going to get the second-round picks and these undrafted players, and we're going to bank on this player development system that Eric Spoelstra, Pat Riley, they've all incubated this system that turns these diamonds in the rough. Max Strus had a bad game for, but that's a guy that tried to work in Boston, tried to work in other organizations. Chicago. It works in Miami. And I think that's the moral of the story here is we got to give a shout out to Adam Simon, who's the assistant GM, who's running the G League team for the Miami Heat, finding these diamonds in the rough and turning them into really good NBA players. That's their system.
I don't think you came close to answering the question I asked you. You talked about the Miami Heat, and I asked you who won the Clippers-Oklahoma City trade.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It was a great answer, though.
But what do you mean? It wasn't the answer to the question.
Doesn't matter.
If you asked that question, it would have been a great answer.
Fantastic.
Thank you for joining us, Michael.
My pleasure.
You were one of the faces of my summer vacation and binging all those VH1 I Love series.
Sure.
Yeah.
Michael, I have to be honest. That's why we're having you on, because I wanted to see your face and think of a nostalgic time where you were, I don't know the adjective I would use, glib, clever, but you were an accent on these shows that I like this person. This person has the right sensibilities about what is happening in entertainment and America. You made me like you. You forced me to.
Well, we'll change your opinion of me by the end of this interview, if possible.
Excellent.
Is this the thing that people know of yours that connects you to them the most, or do you think it's just a weird, funny thing in your past that is sugary and sweet?
Neither nor. Some people know me from it. Some people know me from other shit. Most people have no idea who I am.
Can you just tell the story how it came to be? Because I did not know who you were until you were on these shows, and I'm like, this guy's consistently the funniest guy on here, as he's taking me on a trip of nostalgia through the 90s.
The way it came to be, funny story, they called and said, do you want to be on this thing? And I was like, okay.
I do hate you. You're right.
Yeah, record time there, Michael.
Feeling pretty good about it.
How does that happen? It's just okay. I won't ask you any more about this because
Well, I was on another TV show at the time called Ed, so my face was out there. So they were, I think they were just going through people who were local because they were shooting in New York, so they were just looking for local actors and comedians and whoever.
Tell us about Ed.
It was an NBC television program that ran from, I want to say, 2000 to 2004, starring the Canadian Tom Cavanaugh as a big city lawyer who goes home to Speckyville, Ohio, and buys himself a bowling alley. And I played the bowling alley manager.
We don't really consider how early it is on the West Coast when we do these interviews.
You were
Sometimes.
stretching when we started.
I'm East Coast. I'm in Georgia, baby.
Oh, really?
Where? Savannah?
No, I'm just bored.
How many of these are you wandering around the earth doing, being bored by?
How many of these interviews have I done?
Yes.
Oh no, this is the first of the day.
We're just that boring.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Asshole.
Really? This is what we're going to do? A Better Man, a mostly serious letter to my son is available now in paperback. Writing funny is hard. Writing funny while teaching your son about how he might be a better man seems even harder. So this project, where did it come from and what does it mean to you?
It came from tragedy. It came from the Parkland shootings in Parkland, Florida, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, when I'd been somebody who'd been really vocal about gun control for a long time. And when that happened, I just started screaming on Twitter, as I always do, to no effect. And I started talking about how I spend a lot of time railing against guns, but I never talk about how it's always boys and young men who are pulling the triggers. And nobody talks about that. And why is it that we just always assume that it's going to be guys who are pulling the triggers and we're always correct? So what is it? What is it about violence in men? So I just wrote that, I was just, yelling into the void on Twitter. And then the New York Times contacted me and said, "Hey, do you want to write an op-ed about this?" And I was like, "Not really, because I don't know what I'm talking about." And they were like, "But we're the New York Times." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll write an op-ed for you." So I did. And it got published, and then a publisher said, "Hey, do you want to write a book about it?" And I said the same thing. I was like, "I don't think I'm your guy. Like, I'm not an expert on this shit. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm doing." And they were like, "But we'll pay you not very much money." I'm like, "All right, keep talking."
But I guess that's part of the charm, though, right? Are you an accidental activist in this regard, and that you've been shouting about it because it's outrageous, because you're filled with rage, because of how stupid and dehumanizing it is, and heartbreaking, and just great, terrible pain, suffering involved with mass shootings being normalized in this country? So you're enraged. You're a funny person who's enraged. And the publisher just wants to tap into, this is just a person, a concerned citizen who's pissed off.
I think that was sort of their take on it. They were like, "Look, we know you're not, a gender theorist. We know you're not a sociologist. You're just a jerk-off comedian, best known for talking about Cabbage Patch Kids. But you have a voice and you have a son, and maybe you have something to offer." So I was like, "All right, fine." So I wrote a book about it.
Why did that one? I live in Parkland, so I live right down the street from Stoneman Douglas, and I'm wondering, why did that one draw out your rage? Why was it that one, that moment? What happened there?
It wasn't that one in particular. I'd been yelling about this since Sandy Hook. my kids went to school the town over from Sandy Hook. We were in Connecticut. And it's just that after all those years, that was the first time that I sort of connected the obvious question of guns and young men and violence in young men and the problems that men are going through right now. The questions of identity, questions of purpose, questions of, you know, the very basic question, like, what does it mean to be a man today? And, you know, I don't know that I know any better than anybody else, but I had some thoughts about it.
Well, and you went to the deep end, though, too. For the pop culture guy who talks about Cabbage Patch dolls, you are going into the asking of the question of what is it about men specifically that makes us so angry that we would use weaponry to kill?
Yeah, I went pretty far into the deep end, and you know, it for a comedian, you know, nobody wants comedians to like opine, you know, nobody wants that. I don't want that. So it was hard. It was a real leap of faith for me to be like, you know, I have something to say about this. I have something to say about it in a serious way. Can I trust that people will go with me and just, you know, sort of suspend judgment about this comedian and just hear me as a father? And fortunately they did. I mean, you know, the book's been doing well, and you know, I don't consider myself an activist in any way, shape, or form. I'm not out there holding up placards. I'm not chanting in the streets. You know, I don't have that kind of energy. I'm just somebody who has, you know, some opinions, for better or for worse.
Oh, no, this is activism, sir. I beg to differ. You poured yourself into a book. It's a difficult thing. Writing funny is hard. You tackled difficult subject matter. You did it for months for not very much pay. Like, no, this is activism. Something broke your heart about how boys treat each other, and you decided to write a letter to your son, and you don't strike me as the type who does that to monetize. Like, yeah, monetization is nice, but you've decided to do the hardest thing. So no, that's activism.
Yeah, but if I could figure out a way to monetize it, I would. I absolutely would.
Well, I'm proud of you.
And what did you learn? Like, what conclusions did you draw about what the state of man?
So, a few conclusions. The first is, okay, so the first obvious one is that the state of man is a little bit in crisis. And there are many reasons for that. Some of them are economic, some of them are technological, some of them are global, some of them have to do with the redefinition of women over the last 50, 60 years. Some of them have to do with demographic changes. And some of them have to do with the way that the work, just the nature of work itself is changing. So there's a lot going on in the world of men. There's a lot going on in terms of men having to figure out how they fit into a world that is changing around them. One of the conclusions that I drew is that we do not need to redefine masculinity. That masculinity, as we have always understood it, has a lot to be said for it. There's a lot of good in the way we think about men. However, there's also a lot of stuff that we need to address, you know, and that falls under that sort of umbrella term of toxic masculinity, which is a term I tend not to use. And so to me, the idea is that we don't need to redefine masculinity. We need to just expand how we think about men so that when we talk about men and manhood, we're not just talking about strong dudes who, you know, the how much can you bench bro guys. We're talking about the full spectrum of our humanity. So you can be like, I just came from the gym, and you can be that dude at times, but you can also be a dude who hugs his kids, and you can also be a dude who does the laundry, and you can also be a dude who's there to listen to your partner. You can be just, and none of that demeans your masculinity. All of that enhances it. And the other thing that kind of surprised me about my own conclusions was that I came into it sort of thinking that men, a lot of dudes are just, for lack of a better word, douchebags. And we're better than that. And the way that the traditional way that a lot of men were raised, which is something that I always kind of rejected, I ended up having a lot of sympathy for, and a lot of sympathy for guys who were taught and raised to believe that your job as a dude is to go out and provide and protect. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. And I think men are trying to figure out new ways to function in a world where maybe their wife or partner earns more than they do, where they don't, the sort of like protect the tribe at all costs mentality of the last few thousand, tens of thousands of years is no longer quite as important as being a member of a community that is, where you don't need to be a lone wolf. You can cooperate and collaborate and express yourself and be creative. Like, all that's really valuable. And that's sort of what I learned.
I want to ask you about your father, but is your book, would you describe it as man loving, man hating?
Loving, I would hope. I think that. I mean, that's. I'm very pro guy. I'm very in favor of men and what's good about us and the best of us and all the contributions that we make, which are numerous. We do great stuff, and it's easy to shit on us because we do a lot of terrible stuff too. But there's many guys going out there every day just working to do their best and help people, support their communities. And we just need more of it. That's all.
What was your shaping and imprinting when it came to masculinity? Or what were the patterns that you most had to break and that you wish to break as you hand them down to your son, broken?
My upbringing was weird because I grew up in a lesbian household in the 80s. And at a time where that just wasn't a thing. And it's funny because my mom and her partner were kind of, they were sort of stereotypical 80s lesbians, if there is such a thing as a stereotypical 80s lesbian. Like they were kind of like angry and sort of man-hating, and they had a lot of reason to be angry. Both of them did, for the way that they fit into the world or didn't fit into the world. But, they spent a lot of time kind of shitting on dudes and being like, men are X, Y, and Z, and men are what's wrong with the world. And, a lot of their analysis wasn't wrong, but it definitely had an effect on the three young boys growing up in that household. At least it did on me. And I, definitely found myself not wanting to grow up to be one of those guys that they were talking about. I wasn't really that conscious of it at the moment, but in later years, I certainly became aware of that kind of imprinting. My dad was, my parents divorced when my mom started sleeping with the neighbor lady, as that tends to happen. And my dad was a good guy. He was a very sort of gentle guy, kind of a nerd, bookish, and didn't really know how to talk to kids, didn't really know how to express himself. emotionally. And, it was hard. He died when I was 12. And I never really had the kind of relationship that I wanted with him. We saw him and, and he was, I think he was a good father, but kind of a bad dad. Like he just didn't know how to be a dad. And, he died right when I was sort of getting to know him a little bit. And that was hard. It was really hard.
Also a formative age, though, when a boy becomes a man, right? So this is, what a unique perspective. I wonder if this is the reason that you wrote the book, that you want this time that you were formed, you want people to see, hey, these things that were imprinted on me because of my environment, you can break through them. You just have to see them.
No doubt. And one of the things that I think I wasn't aware of when I was asked to write the book, I hadn't really thought about it, was that I was actually well positioned to write it because consciously or no, I've been thinking about these issues my whole life. Additionally, I've been thinking about them because for my whole life, just because of the way I am, people have always assumed that I'm gay. And I've always, I've always just had to deal with that. I've always just had to deal with that feeling of people sort of misunderstanding or misidentifying me as a guy. So this stuff has been churning in me for my whole life. And so I just, the book is an attempt to just sort of lay out what I think guys are all about, for good and for bad, and the ways that we can all get a little bit better.
Have you analyzed consciously where your funny comes from within whatever the awkwardness of all of this was? Like how the funny shaped you around?
Just natural genius, just natural.
Just came to you, huh?
I think like a lot of guys, like a lot of comedians, it came as a defense mechanism. It's a way of dealing with the world that doesn't require you punching people in the face. I think it's really that simple.
I can imagine you being pretty cruel, though, pretty slicing with your comedy. I can imagine that if someone was arguing with you, that would not go well with them. It usually doesn't with comedians, but I can imagine that you got very good at the sculpting of that weapon.
Well, one of the things I learned when I was in high school in particular is that I was younger than most of my classmates. I was skinnier than most of my classmates. And I learned that it was easier in a way for me to be cutting, and it was easier for me to sort of be, cutting, let's say, sarcastic, and give it back to people because there was no upside for them in beating me up, because I was too easy a target. So it's like I could kind of get away with everything because, there was no glory in hitting me. So that was helpful.
But you're also carrying through the formative years, not just the grief of having lost your father, but whatever the awkwardness is of high school students not understanding. I don't know if they think you're gay from back then, or if you have to explain the relationship you've got at home because you've got two moms. Like, I can imagine that's a real cauldron for awkward, for creative, for pain, for laughter.
Yeah, I mean, the like my household situation, they kind of kept on the down low, even though it was absurd. Everybody knew, but I think everybody sort of turned a blind eye to it because it was just like one of those things that nobody wanted to really address. Occasionally, I'd get teased for it. But yeah, I mean, I think adolescence for a lot of people can be channeled into self-expression. It was for me, for creativity. It was for me. And surprisingly for somebody who everybody thought was gay, like I always had girlfriends. like I did pretty well. Maybe because like maybe because I was not those other guys like I grew up in New Jersey in the 80s, it's like if Burger King became like the national culture, that was sort of like the culture that I grew up in. It was just like greasy and gross and, full of big hair and bad music and jockish. And I just wasn't that. And I think maybe, girls liked that I wasn't.
Michael, you said earlier that your father, he was a good father, but a bad dad. Can you explain that? Like explain the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, he took care of us and he loved us and he was, he fulfilled all of his responsibilities as a father, but like as a dad, he just struggled. Like he just didn't know how to connect with children. He didn't know how to give a hug. He didn't know how to say, I love you. He didn't know, he didn't really know like kind of what we were interested in. Like he was a little bit clueless as a dad. Very sweet guy, but just like didn't know how to take that leap into just being a dad. He didn't know, I never roughhoused with him. I never, every once in a while, like we'd, like he'd try, like he would try like to take us on like a little trip or something and, engage with us. But it was just hard for him. He just wasn't a naturally good dad.
The name of the book, A Better Man, A Mostly Serious Letter to My Son, is available now in paperback. Did it hurt to write?
Yeah, I guess so. But one of the things that I liked about it was, all writing sucks. All writing is difficult. Sometimes just the physical act of it, sometimes just emotionally it's difficult. But one of the things I really liked about it was the more I started writing this book to my son, the more I realized I was also writing it to my dad. And it was nice to reconnect in that way, because I did feel like I was kind of connecting with him through the writing of this book. And I kind of treasured that aspect of it. So yeah, it was painful, but it was also, there was also something really nice about it, of feeling like I was writing this for my son, I was writing it for my dad, I was writing it for myself. And I felt like I was sort of wrapping up 3 generations of my family as I was doing this. And it felt really good.
I was curious because you added the myself to the middle of it, or to the end of it there. You said my son to my dad to myself, and I think you might have gotten the order wrong from what if you're just sort of naturally gravitating toward the position of I need to understand my life and the things that have damaged me and the things that have damaged men, and I'm pissed off because why are we shooting kids in school? I don't know like where your journey started on this, if you just thought a letter to my son would be nicer, but it sounds in the retelling like you were writing it to yourself because there was some stuff here you weren't conscious about before you sat down to start writing.
Oh yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Like the title of the book, A Better Man, is addressed to myself as much as, or more so than it is to my kid. It's like all of us, I think when we reach adulthood, it's important to continuously self-interrogate and ask ourselves, like, how are we doing? Like, who are we right now? Like, what are the things that are troubling us? What are the things that we feel good about? How can we sort of just continually get slightly better on a day-to-day basis? And that's as true or more true for me as it is for anybody else. I mean, I suck a lot of the times. And I'm just trying to be a little bit better.
Michael, thank you for being on with us. Thank you for taking us on an unexpected journey here through some serious stuff. I'd like to end on a lighter note with just a couple of questions, though, if I may. One, if just you have anything for me on your run as Raphael in the promotional campaign for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles concert tour.
I will say that as bad as you might think a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle suit would smell, it probably smells a little bit worse than that.
Thank you. You took us right inside the costume. And my last question was just wondering if the sock puppet dog from pets.com is anywhere around, or has he been retired? Is he in the attic? Like he no longer exists, or is he?
He's looking for it.
He's looking for it now in the house.
I might have it right here. I'm trying to. We moved recently, so I'm not sure where I put it.
He'll be in one of the boxes or something. Right? Care about it that much.
It's going to be wonderful though if he's just got it like this. If he's just got it in a box nearby.
He has it. Yes. Michael Ian Black.
Yes,
you know what? You are right. I don't like you. I love you, Michael Ian Black.
How can you not love him? He found it in the house. This. What an honor.
I cannot believe this question worked.
What a good
my
answer.
guy.
Look at this.
Yes.
Hey, I'm the pets.com sock puppet.
Look at us.
I drive companies into bankruptcy. That's what I do.
What else did you do?
I only want to speak to the puppet now.
Can I interview the sock puppet? What are your claims to fame, sock puppet? How many places did you bankrupt?
Well, there was the one company, the tech company, then a car insurance company, and then I'm working on bankrupting a third.
The puppet has to pick games for us.
It is. I do. We do have to get the puppet. Do you mind being our celebrity picker during football season? You did say I just came back from the gym to make sure that none of your man credentials were revoked. Do you want to pick football games with the boys? Like do man things.
Course.
Excellent.
I'll go. Yeah. I mean, well, I did spend 9 years in the NFL. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. I want you to.
Thank you, Michael. Again, I tell the people, A Better Man, a mostly serious letter to my son. It sounds very personal, very intimate, and it sounds interesting. Thank you for sharing it with us, Michael.
My total pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Michael.
Gracias.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Totally. Thanks, guys.
Okay. And we're serious about the game, so you know.
Yeah, we're going to call you. We're going to call you.
Right.
We are going to call you.
And the puppet.
And the puppet.
And the puppet.
Okay. The puppet picks games. Okay?
Hopefully we weren't too bored by that by the end of it.